Good morning, students. So today we had focus on the classroom activity from the chapter, which is the Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansta Sovendra Shekhar. So basically, this chapter is about how literature unfolds and interrogates the way power designs both social relations and the relations between man and environment. So today we had focus on the classroom activity 5 from page number 118 onwards. So the first question is that what does the narrator use to relate the story of the Sandals? So basically here we had to focus on regarding the narrator, in which what does the narrator use to relate the story of the Sandals? So the narrator uses the first person narrative with the personal pronoun I. And also, the story is narrated by a 60-year-old Sandal. This perspective and the empathetic tone manage to move the hearts of the reader. So that's regarding the narrator, in which point of view or what does the narrator use to relate the story of the Sandals. So basically, the narrator uses the first person narrative with a personal pronoun which is I. Now we have to focus on the second question, in which if you were living the lives of the Sandals, what would you find the most disturbing and how would you resist it? So basically we can answer to this question by living a life of a Sandal is a harrowing experience. To lose one's own land and the riches in its underbelly, to lose one's language and culture only to be thrown out of their homeland, rendering them as refugees or faceless names on a government list is a near to death experience. The greatest form of resistance in times of turbulence is unity, which the Sandal community in the story lacks. Those, those in power have always in history been terrorized by the might of the underprivileged that flock the streets. So basically, this signifies that those in power have always in history have the power, have the authority over the others. So this is regarding the life of the Sandals, in which living a life of a Sandal is a harrowing experience, which means that a kind of painful experience. And also to lose one's own land and the richness in its underbelly, to lose one's language and culture only to be thrown out of their homeland, rendering them as a refugees or faceless names on a government list is a near to death experience. So basically, this was the experience of the Sandal community during that time. So this signifies that the life of a Sandal community with a harrowing experience. Then the greatest form of resistance in times of turbulence is unity, which the Sandal community in the story lacks. So basically, the unity is the strength of each community. So basically, in the Sandal community, we have a kind of lack of this unity. So this is also a very important factor regarding the life of the Sandal community, especially in this story, which is the Adivasi will not dance. Now we have the third question, in which do you think the mode of resistance adopted by the protagonist helps the cause of the Sandals? So basically here we had to focus on regarding the protagonist of the story. So the 60-year-old Sandal protagonist who silenced his disagreements with the capitalist system until the end of the story emerges as a rebel when he refuses to dance in front of the power wielders, and the Adivasi will not dance thus becomes a very political statement through a mighty negation on the face of the state. This mode of protest finds parallels in the story, which is The Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner by Alan Silotti, where the protagonist refuses to run in a long distance race as a rebellion towards the authority. So this is what we had to focus on in this chapter, in which this is a kind of rebellion towards the authority, in which the Adivasi will not dance in such a way that it becomes a kind of very political statement through a mighty negation on the face of the state. And also this is a kind of mode of protest which finds parallels in the short story, which is The Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner by Alan Silotti. Then this mode of resistance adopted by the Sandal hero will fetch immediate media attention, which Sandals lacked until then. It can draw the plight of the Adivasis to the attention of the state, thus effecting a change. So basically here we had to focus on regarding the mode of resistance adopted by the protagonist of the story, who is Mangal Murmu. So basically the Adivasi will not dance thus becomes a kind of political statement through a mighty negation on the face of the state, and also it is a kind of rebellion towards the authority. So that's regarding the third question that we had to keep in mind. Now we have the fourth one, in which what do the others in his community do to escape the oppression? So basically, to escape the oppression, no evidence of the resistance from the Sandals are indicated by the story. The men swallowed their protest and succumbed to the will of their state. They migrated in search of work. Women are said to have resorted to prostitution on the Koila road. Only when there is the risk of a mass upspring of the land that the Sandals resort to a massive protest which is immediately disbursed by the authority. History, however, is rich with stories of tribal resistance. The Sandals rebelled against imposed authority in the 1850s, resulting in the passing of the Sandal Tenancy Act, which is referred in this story. And also the heroic stories of the Munda tribal chief, who is Birsa Munda, which echo in the history which made the authorities to name the international airport of Jharkhand after the Munda chiefs. So basically it is a kind of history which signifies the tribal resistance. So that's regarding the fourth question that we have to keep in mind. Now we have the fifth one, in which trace the ways in which power deprives the Sandals of their most valued possessions, their land, art, language, culture, and identity. So the answer to this question is very important, in which power is omnipresent, which means power is everywhere. So basically this is also the Foucault's concept on the power, in which power is omnipresent, power is everywhere. In every action we have a kind of power. So Foucault's position on power is that even a dark room can exert power on a man inside. The play of power renders the underprivileged economically weak, devoid of resources, and sometimes homeless, as in the case of the Sandals. Those in power are backed by the state in deep mining the coal buried in the underbellies of the land, which traditionally belonged to the Sandals, who had the legal document to prove their ownership. But with onset of mining, the Sandals were outcast and geographically marginalized. Also, their art and culture were deemed uncivilized. Their religion was considered pagan by the Christian missionaries, and also they were forced to convert and worship in this religion. So that's regarding how the power deprives the Sandals of their most valued possessions, which includes their land, art, language, culture, and identity. So basically, this is based on the concept of the power by Foucault, in which power is omnipresent, which means power is everywhere. And also, according to Foucault's position on power, is that even a dark room can exert power on a man inside. And also, the play of power renders the underprivileged economically weak, devoid of resources, and sometimes homeless, as in the case of the Sandals. So basically, here we had focused on regarding the Sandal community, in which how the power was exercised over the Sandal community by the dominant forces in the society. So that's regarding the fifth question. Now we have the next question, in which what are the ways in which power works in the story. So basically this is also a very important question regarding this chapter, in which what are the ways in which power works in the society. So denying a Sandal his land, language, art and culture is a metaphorical ethnic genocide. His songs and dance are, however, inevitable to market the ethnic diversity of the state. Then the very existence of a Sandal gets capitalized through the play of power. So basically, overall, the play of power is very important regarding this chapter, in which denying a Sandal his land, language, art, and culture is a kind of metaphorical ethnic genocide, which means a kind of ethnic mastery concept. And also, his songs and dance are, however, inevitable to market the ethnic diversity of the state. Then the very existence of a Sandal gets capitalized through the play of power. So basically here you had focused on regarding the concept of this power, in which in every aspect of the story there is a kind of very existence of a Sandal in such a way that the Sandal community gets capitalized through the play of power. So that's regarding this question. Now we have the seventh one, in which how does the power appear many layered, which means economic, cultural, social and psychological, and how do these layers act and react in the context of the story. So basically here we had to focus on regarding the different layers of this power, how the power is imposed over this Sandal community. So power functions in many layers in the story. Economically, the play of power renders the poor poorer and the class gap is widened by the exercise of power. Those in power steal the financial resources offered by the Sandal's land. coal mining is monopolized by the powerful, denying the Sandals their right to re-steal what they rightfully own. And socially, the Sandals are marginalized by being driven out of their land and branding their religion as pagan. Culturally, the Sandals are deprived of their language, art, music, and dance, which become necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. All these result in an accumulated psychological trauma that emotionally incapacitates the Sandal. So that's regarding how the power in which it functions in many layers in this story. So the first one is regarding the economical, in which the play of power renders the poor the poorer. Then the class gap is widened by the exercise of power. And also, those in power steal the financial resources offered by the Sandal's land. So it is also very clear in this story in which those in power steal the financial resources offered by the Sandal's land. Then regarding the culture in which coal mining is monopolized by the powerful, denying the Sandals their right to re-steal, in which what they rightfully own. Then regarding the social aspects, the Sandals are marginalized by being driven out of their land and branding their religion as a pagan. Then finally, regarding the cultural aspect and also the psychological aspects, culturally the Sandals are deprived of their language, art, music and dance, which become necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So basically the cultural values of the Sandal communities, it was very important regarding their language, art, music and dance, which become necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So this signifies that the dance of the Adivasis. So it was necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So culturally, the Sandals are deprived of their language, art, music, and dance, which become necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So basically, regarding the cultural values of the Sandal community, it is very important regarding the point of view of the society, because the society needs all these kinds of things, which includes the language, art, and music, especially the dance of this Adivasi. So it become necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So this is also very important regarding the Sandal community, in which their dance, their art, their music, all these kinds of things were necessary only to promote the ethnic heritage of Jharkhand. So all these result in an accumulated psychological trauma that incapacitates the Sandal community. So that's regarding the seventh question that we had to keep in mind. Now we have to focus on the next classroom activity. So in this section we have to read a section from this textbook page number 119 onwards. So here we had focus on regarding this section in which while we were fighting, this political leader came, that political leader came, this Christian sister came, that Christian father came, apparently to support us. But we lost, and after we lost, everyone left. The leaders went back to Ranchi and Delhi or wherever they had to go. The Christians returned to their missions, but our land did not come back to us. On the other hand, a Christian sister was killed and our boys were implicated in her murder. The papers, the media, everyone blamed our boys. They reported that the Christian sister was fighting for our rights and yet our boys killed her. No one bothered to see that our boys had been fighting for our land and rights from even before that Christian sister came. Why would they kill her? Just because our boys did not have reporter friends. Their fight went unseen, while the Christian sister, with her network of missionaries and their friends, got attention. Now that our boys are in jail on false charges of murder, who will fight for us? Where are the missionaries and their friends now? If the missionaries are our well wishers and were fighting for us, why did they run away? Kill a well known Christian sister, accuse a few unknown Sandal boys fighting for their lands of her murder, move both obstacles. The Christian sister and the Sandal boys out of the way, grab as much as land as possible, build as many mines as possible, and dig out all the coal. This is how this coal company works. Is this scenario so difficult to understand that the media does not get it? So basically after reading this passage from this story, we had to focus on one important question in which what do you think the media doesn't get it, or does it? So basically it is not that media fails to see the Sandal reality, but they have other events and other perspective of national interest to focus their attention on. Tribal issues are probably the last to find a space on the news, irrespective of their locations. So basically, this was the reality in which it is not that media fails to see this another reality, but they have other events and other perspective of national interest to focus their attention on. And also the tribal issues. So here the issues of this other community that are probably the last to find a space on the news, irrespective of their locations. So this is regarding this question in which what do you think the media doesn't get it or does it? സോ അവിടെ പറയുകയാണ് സാന്താൾ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി അവർ അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരിക്കലും മീഡിയ അറ്റൻഷൻ ലഭിച്ചിരുന്നില്ല. സോ ഇതിന് റിയാലിറ്റി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എന്താണ്? ഒരിക്കലും അവർക്കൊരു ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല, ഒരു മീഡിയ അറ്റൻഷന് വേണ്ടിയുള്ള ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് ഒരിക്കലും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ഇവരൊരു ട്രൈബൽ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി എന്ന രീതിയിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ട്രൈബൽ ഇഷ്യൂസിന് അന്നത്തെ കാലത്ത് ആരും മീഡിയ അറ്റൻഷൻ കൊടുത്തിരുന്നില്ല. സോ എവിടെയാണോ പവർ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എവിടെയാണോ അതിൻ്റെ പൊളിറ്റിക്സ് ഒക്കെ ഉള്ളത് ആ രീതിക്കായിരുന്നു അന്ന് മീഡിയ അറ്റൻഷൻ പോയിരുന്നത്. സോ ഇതാണ് ഈ ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ്റെ ഒരു ആൻസർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. So the next question is that comment on the usual role of NGOs in sites of conflict in the context of the intervention of the Christian missionaries. So here the NGO means non-government organizations. So basically NGOs play an important role in mobilizing the tribal population. In the instance of the massive land usurp, which means the takeover for the thermal plant that rendered the Sandals homeless and their protest sabotage, the NGOs help to mobilize them, to give them voice and file petitions on behalf of the unlettered tribes. However, outside interventions such as that of the missionaries also had an unintentional side that culturally deprives the Sandals. Then the Christian missionaries believed the Sandals to be pagan and attempt to baptize and rename them. Also, the conflicts between the Christian sisters and the tribals further put the Sandal boys in danger. So basically here we have to focus on regarding the role of NGOs. So here the role of NGO means to mobilize them and also to give them the voice and file petitions on behalf of the unlettered tribes. So this was the duty of the NGOs or the role of the NGOs. So that's regarding this question. Now we have a very short passage in which a thick and green wooded forest does not appear the same to a businessman, a carpenter and a poet. The businessman can only see the huge logs of wood that he can sell. The carpenter invariably imagines chairs, tables, cots and cupboards. For a poet, it is his muse. So after reading this short passage, it is clear that how a short object or a thing, it is different to different persons, especially for the businessman, for a carpenter, for a poet. So here we have a thick and green wooded forest in such a way that it does not appear the same to a businessman, a carpenter and a poet. And in the point of view of the businessman, he can only see the huge logs of wood that he can sell. Then the carpenter will imagine regarding the chairs, tables, cots and cupboards. And finally for a poet, it is his muse. Now we have another question in which how do the Sandals and the mining company owners perceive the land and its resources in the village of Matyajor? Is there a difference? If there is, why? So the perceptions of the land vary from a Sandal to the mining company. Then the Sandal lives in harmony with the land without taking the ownership over it, but considering himself as a tenant and treating the land with reverence. The mining company lacks any commitment towards the land and nature. It recklessly exploits the land for the monetary benefit. This difference in perspective of the old owners and the new owners of the land terribly threaten the ecology and the tribal existence. So basically here we have to focus on regarding the Sandals and also regarding the mining company owners. So how they treated the land and also the resources. So especially regarding the Sandal lives in harmony with the land without taking ownership over it, but considering himself as a tenant and treating the land with reverence. Whereas the mining company lacks any commitment towards the land and nature. So this is the major difference in which they recklessly exploit the land for monetary benefit. So this difference in perspective of the landowners and the new owners of the land terribly threaten the ecology and the tribal existence. So that's regarding this question. Now we have one important question regarding this chapter in which how do the powerful exercise their hegemony and how are the Sandals interpolated? Explore this story. So this is very important regarding this chapter, in which those in powers have their own means to exercise their hegemony over the powerless. They will always be backed by the side. They find ways to oust the tribal out of their land, socially, culturally and psychologically weaken them. All their resistance gets sabotaged by those in power. So basically here we had to focus on regarding the power and also how the power was exercised over the Sandal community. So because those in powers have their own means to exercise their hegemony over the powerless. So this is the basic concept that we had to keep in mind why hegemony is worked in this chapter. So basically those in powers have their own means to exercise their hegemony over the powerless. So here the authorities, they have the powers in which they can exercise their hegemony over the powerless people. So here the powerless people means the Sandal community in this story. Then they will always be backed by the state. They find ways to oust the tribal out of their land, socially, culturally and psychologically weaken them. So this is how they get interpolated. So this means that the Sandals get interpolated because all these kinds of problems, in which they will always be backed by the state. They find ways to oust. So here the they signifies the authorities. They find ways to oust the tribal out of their land, socially, culturally and psychologically weaken them. And also all their resistance gets sabotaged by those in power. So here the term sabotage means attimarikunna avastha. So basically they are the voiceless people, they are the powerless people regarding the Sandal community. So that's regarding this question. This is very important regarding this chapter, in which we had focused on how the hegemony or how the interpolation which is present in this story. So that's regarding this question. Now we have to read a short passage from this story. For every benefit in job, in education, in whatever, the Diku are quick to call the Jargandi their own. Let the Adivasi go to hell. But when it comes to displaying the Jargandi culture, the onus of singing and dancing is upon the Adivasi alone. So after reading this passage, we have one question, in which what does the writer use irony here? And which point of view is foregrounded in this story? So basically here we had focused on regarding this question, in which how the concept of this irony which is used in this story. The irony in this story is that the culture that is perpetually ignored by the state suddenly becomes the face of the state. Then the state that was continuously attempting to silence and cripple the Adivasi now wanted the Adivasi to sing and dance for them. So basically their intention was to uplift their Jargandi culture by singing and dancing through means of these Adivasis, especially regarding the Sandal community. So this is the irony which is used in this story, in which the irony in the story is that the culture that is perpetually ignored by the state suddenly becomes the face of the state. അതായത് ഇവിടെ സാന്തൽ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയുടെ ഡാൻസിനെ പറ്റിയാണ് പറയുന്നത്, ആദിവാസി ഡാൻസിനെ പറ്റിയാണ് പറയുന്നത്. So basically, so once it was ignored by the state, suddenly it becomes the face of the state. It becomes the culture of the state. So this is the irony which is used in this story. So the state that was continuously attempting to silence and cripple the Adivasi now wanted the Adivasi to sing and dance for them. So this is the irony, or this is the point of view which is foregrounded in the story. Now regarding the Sandal community, they are supposed to sing and dance for the Jargandi culture, for their pride. So basically this is how once it was ignored by the state, suddenly becomes the face of the state, which signifies the culture of the Sandal community became the face of the state, which signifies the Adivasis dance became the pride of that state. So that's regarding the classroom activity 5 based on the chapter which is the Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansta Sovendra Shekhar. So that's regarding the third module. So in this module we have two important chapters which includes A Hanging by George Orwell and the Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansta Sovendra Shekhar. And also we have some important concepts which includes the power, hegemony, interpolation, discourse, ideology, power play, then irony. So all these kinds of topics are very important regarding this chapter. And also we have the classroom activities. It is also important regarding the examination point of view. So you have to focus on these classroom activities. So we already discussed regarding the 4 classroom activity and also you submitted it. So you have to focus on these classroom activity including the 5th one for your examination point of view. So you have to study all these kinds of classroom activity. Not only this concept, all these kinds of concepts including the power, hegemony, interpolation, then ideology, discourse, irony and also the power play. You have to just understand all these kinds of concepts and you have to apply it practically while doing these kinds of classroom activities. So this is the point that you have to keep in mind. The classroom activities in this chapter, we have 5 major classroom activities in which you already submitted the first 4 classroom activities, and also you have to submit the 5th one which we discussed today. So these are the topics that you have to keep in mind regarding the module, which is the literature and ideology. And in the next class, we had to focus on the 4th module, especially regarding the 3 poems from that. So today we discussed regarding the classroom activity from the chapter, which is the Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansdas Sovendra Shekhar. So go through this classroom activity and study well. So that's for today. Thank you. Happy learning.